Dr. Pepper difference. Charge!
Let the movie speak.
Greetings, listeners. This is Travis.
Hi, I'm Justin.
Hi, Justin.
Hey, Travis.
Our smoothest start yet.
Woo!
We're getting better and better. That's what my mom tells me anyway.
Yeah, mine too.
Okay. Well, at
It's
least
my
our moms
grandma
are
for
listening.
me.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We support.
No, my mom won't, but my grandmother will.
Okay. Well, you got issues with your mom? Is it because I kept making jokes about her enlarged heart on that episode? I can't remember that.
It's just this podcast in general. She just, when I mention it, I said, "Mom, on the podcast," and she just shakes her head and lights up another cigarette. You know, it's
She's like, I regret every decision I made regarding you as a
Right.
child. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, cool. Hey, well, we are back. We are back in the 1950s after a really fun, rip-roaring conversation about 1954 Sabrina with Annie last week, which was super fun.
Annie.
Yeah, she's the best.
We still got to work on our Annie theme song, Travis.
Yeah, we could parody something from the musical Annie, like
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking of borrowing from Amy, What You Want to Do, and of course substituting Annie.
That's not
in
bad.
there. But yes, we should probably just mix them together.
Yeah.
And I'm sure this is really fascinating for listeners to hear about.
when they hear the finished track, they're gonna know what
They're
the
like, I
pieces
was
of the puzzle
there
are.
in the beginning.
I was there. Yeah, it'll be great. And Annie will, she'll hate it if we're honest.
Yeah. Well, that's why we're doing it.
Yeah, mostly. So we kind of jumped around with the years because this isn't, strictly chronological the way we run our series,
Right.
but we are in the mid 50s from here on out, give or take a couple films, really. So today is 1951, and that's kind of, we're leaving the beginning of the decade behind, but this is a very interesting first time watch for me, Justin. It is the original, and if you don't even have any bearing on what the original of this series is, that's okay. I don't blame you. The original Godzilla from 1954. Yeah, 1954.
Yes.
Yeah. So I can't wait to talk about it because I was surprised at what kind of a movie it was, Justin. How about you?
Yeah, no, I was too, man. I've seen a fair amount of Godzilla movies. Actually, apparently there's
have you? Okay.
36. I counted them today.
Yeah, that's not enough.
Between Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think I saw this actual movie at a friend's house when I was 6 or 7 years old.
Oh, gosh.
And their dad was really into Godzilla. And so they sat me down and honestly, I didn't remember any of what this movie is about, which
Yeah.
I'm really excited to talk about today. I just remembered Godzilla, which was awesome.
Sure.
And actually, my kids watched this with me, and they were
Nice.
I don't know. I think one of them was kind of trying to track the plot, and the other one was just like, "When's Godzilla showing up?" So
Well, lucky for that kid, quite a bit. Often. The answer is often, yes. Yeah, I think it's a really interestingly layered movie that you can also somehow watch with your kids. You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
It'll be great to talk about. But before we get into that, we're going to talk about what we watched this week. Throwing it over to
Hey,
you,
Travis,
man.
you should go first.
Aw. Okay, that was like we're playing like we're having a thumb war at a distance.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll go first.
It's only a distance of a few feet, Travis. I can see you right across the table. What are you trying to say? We're
That's
not doing
what
this in the same room or
no,
something?
in the same. We are of the same mind, not even in the same room. Yeah. So
Yeah, come on, man.
shared
What are you
brain, man. We're fine. Everything's fine here, and it's good and great.
Everything's fine.
Okay, so I've been on a little bit of a 90s, early 2000s, like crime movies I haven't seen in a while or I've never seen and sort of want to reappraise. I feel like, I don't know about you, Justin, but like the decade we both grew up in was the 90s, and then we, were kind of coming of age in the early 2000s, and then There's a lot of movies in that space that like maybe I wasn't old enough for, and so my parents might have rented them at Blockbuster, but I never got around to watching them because by the time I was old enough, it was like in the rearview mirror. So I talked about A Simple Plan before, which is what, a 90.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Around the same era. So another movie I caught recently was Christopher Nolan's Insomnia from 2002.
Oh yes,
Yeah. So we have, I don't know, Justin, like it's not love hate, but like I have like an appreciate hate relationship with Christopher Nolan, maybe.
Yes.
Where like you can't deny the craft and the like crazy, almost like Kubrickian, like attention to detail that this guy brings to the table as a director. Especially like visually, and like he sticks to his guns on weird stuff. He's this guy who's like, I need to film everything with an IMAX camera, even though they weigh 8,000 pounds and the movie's going to cost twice as much. And like, we will do everything on film. He's like celluloid or die, like
we call those people artistes.
Sure. Yeah. He's a very specific breed of filmmaker, and that's cool. I like people who, work from a place of conviction. But there's times when like I'm watching a Christopher Nolan movie, whether it's like The Prestige, which I like a lot, or his Batman movies, Inception, any of the like kind of later era Nolan stuff, where he's very like intellectual. I think it's just who he is as a person, and his movies get bogged down by that, in my opinion, and become a little less character effective because they're just like. He gets obsessed with the idea of the movie and less interested in the people in the story. And so that's sort of my struggle with some Nolan movies. That I want to enjoy them because they're so well crafted, but like if the characters aren't relatable and I care about them, then I get lost, So Insomnia, 2002. This is a murder mystery cop movie. So like as far as scale goes, it is way, way more contained than anything he would do after it, or probably ever again, if I'm honest, because I don't see him making these kinds of movies ever again now that he's Mr. $1 billion at the box office kind of a guy. And it stars, the cast rules. I mean, it has Al Pacino in the lead. It has Hilary Swank, Robin Williams, and it's this really kind of dreary, almost neo-noir kind of like cop story of sorts. But what's the hook of it that I think is pretty fun is it takes place in a little place called Alaska. Where
never heard of it.
Yeah, never heard of it. Where it doesn't get dark hardly at all. And so the movie plays with this idea of, an LA cop coming to Alaska to help an old friend on a case, and he can't handle the light. And the light becomes this interesting metaphor for his sort of under the radar illicit cop activities. And it's really good. Like it makes me yearn for the days of Christopher Nolan kind of needed to just take a good script that was thrown his way and make it better because of his solid directing skills. So what's really interesting about it is it has some of those like signature Nolan tricks. It has the let's cut to a weird kind of impressionistic thing. Like it's this in this movie, it's like a macro shot, a super zoomed in shot of like a blood drop kind of like spreading on a piece of cloth. And then that wraps around to make a lot more sense and have context at the end. It has, a male character at the center who is very good at what he does, but also burdened by sort of like the guilt of the system, which you'll see in like every Christopher Nolan movie. It's how he does Batman. It's in Inception. It's basically the character Leo plays. And what's really cool about this movie is it's paced really well, and you don't hear Robin Williams' voice till like almost an hour in. It's like 40 something minutes in, and then you don't see his face until like 10 minutes after that. So I just think they use him really well. It's one of those cases where like you take a broad comedically known actor aside from his, Dead Poet Society kind of types of movies. And everybody rules in this movie. Pacino rules. Hilary Swank is so good. And Robin Williams is really, really good in a dramatic kind of creepy role. So I would recommend, if you've like not heard of this movie and you're like, Christopher Nolan made what? Go watch it, because it's not like Inception. It's smaller than that. And if you haven't seen it for a long time and you kind of forgot about it, I think it's worth a rewatch, because it's got some stuff to say. No spoilers, because we're not talking about the movie today, but it's definitely got some stuff to say. So do you remember Insomnia at all, Justin? I'm sure you saw it at some point, right?
I honestly can't remember. When you said it, I was at first, alas, everyone, I was thinking you meant Memento.
Okay,
totally different movie. So I know the movie you're talking about, but I can't honestly remember if I've seen it or not.
Okay.
So,
well,
I
think
exciting contribution.
For all of the reasons I just listed, you would enjoy it, but hopefully listeners will.
It sounds like I would.
Yeah.
And I definitely would enjoy it more than the movie I watched this week.
Oh boy, here it comes.
Which was, I think, 1988. I don't even. Why mention the year if you don't know what year it is? I mean, what's the point of doing? Am I trying to impress somebody by the year? Am I trying to help them out? Like, if they type in this, are they not going to find it?
I'm impressed,
because there is only one Oliver and Company by Disney.
Oh boy!
And again, I have children in the house, and so of course we're not always gonna. It's like, hey, shut up, 7-year-old. We're gonna watch Insomnia now. No, we tried to limit that to mommy and daddy time. So anyway, yes, I did. We have the privilege of watching Oliver and Company, which, I'm pretty sure I saw this as a kid, Travis. I mean, because this was definitely on VHS aplenty when we were growing up. It's they don't make them like they used to. Let's put it that way. And that comes with some baggage.
By the way, you were right. It is 1988 on the dot. So
man,
vindication. And also, this movie is an hour and 14 minutes. That's barely a movie. But keep going.
It is a blessing, though, in this case. No, to be totally fair. So Oliver and Company, it's like a little bit of it's a updated, transplanted take on Oliver Twist, right?
Sure.
Except that instead of people, we've got cats and dogs.
Yeah.
Because that's what kids like, and it's in New York. But it is, I guess it's a really good indicator, Travis. Sometimes we see movies, and that we talk about movies on this show, where they could be from the 30s or the 40s, or, they're from a few years ago.
Sure.
And we go, wow, that's still so relevant for today. Like, nothing has changed. This is really great. But then I see a kids movie like this, and it's like, oh my goodness gracious, yeah, they're not making kids movies like this anymore.
Yeah,
and some of that I think is just kind of politics and cultural norms change. There's one part where the villain is chasing the dogs and the kid, and he like loads a gun. That's just not something that you really do anymore. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because it's like, wow, it's just very, very different kind of storytelling,
right?
So overall, the broad brushstrokes, I don't think we really need to spend any serious amount of time considering this movie, but it's a musical also, and Billy Joel actually voices the dog in there, and he performs some of the songs in there. So I mean, it's like, it is a movie of its time, and there's no getting away from it. Honestly, overall production is not bad. It's not like a flawless movie by any metric, at least for my money.
Yeah.
And the kids kind of enjoyed it, but it's wow, it's pretty light, and I think because it didn't exist to try to get anyone to say, what is this movie saying?
Yeah.
Interestingly, though, and something that still happens today, there is a really interesting impulse, in my opinion, of folks that take movies that are clearly marketed almost exclusively for children, and they throw in some bizarro adult stuff.
Okay.
What do I mean by that?
Yeah.
Like in this movie, so it's all dogs, right? Anthropomorphic dogs. And so there's one dog that's like a show poodle, right? She was like won all these national awards. It's actually voiced by Bette Midler, who sings too. Whenever I hear the name Bette Midler, Travis, post Seinfeld, that's just all I can think about.
Oh man, that's such a great storyline in
great
Seinfeld.
Stuff.
Yeah.
But anyway, if you haven't seen that, listeners, please do yourself a favor. Not Oliver and Company, but Seinfeld.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Bette Midler's Georgetta in the movie is singing the song that introduces her right to her lavish lifestyle, and so she's a poodle, and so she's her fur is cut in such a way that she kind of has like a large amount of fur around from like her neck down to kind of her rib cage.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point, as she's singing the song, the character pushes her fur in such a way as to perfectly outline like surgical implants of breasts. And it's just really bizarre. I have to tell you, like, it's like, I don't think my kids picked up on it. Thank goodness, because I don't really want to talk about that in the middle of a movie called Oliver and Company about cats and dogs.
Who is that for? Like,
well, that's exactly my point, because my wife and I just looked at each other like, what? Spelled W-U-T. Just like, what do we do with that?
Yeah.
Because it's not really funny even. It's just like kind of awkward.
Yeah,
I don't know.
sure.
But maybe that's the Puritan impulse. I don't know, Travis.
No,
but,
that's weird. I don't care who you are. That's weird. That's
so there's that, and then there's just the what this movie really reminded me of was even as a lad, I was very strange. Apparently, this was the exact kind of movie as a kid that I hated watching.
Yeah.
Because it was not because it was like not serious. I wasn't like, Dad, more insomnia. But because it is like nightmarish in its approach to fantasy. What I mean by that is that they've got this, like the villain in here, right, has like this Cadillac and these Dobermans, and he's chasing the heroes.
I'm
all
vaguely
over
remembering
the city.
these things as you're saying them. We definitely own
I'm
this on
sorry,
VH.
Travis.
No, it's fine. I'll forgive you somehow.
And so anyway, the characters, our protagonists, are on the scooter, right, that their owner, who's a man, is driving down, and they go down the stairs of the subway. And I think as a viewer, even today, I'm thinking, oh, okay, well, of course, the bad guys are going to have to get out on foot. Nope, the Cadillac fits down perfectly down the stairs of the subway. And then it is running down the subway platform with them, and then they're like, oh, crap, well, let's get off and go on the subway track, because that's safe. And so they do that, and then it's like, okay, clearly the bad guys have to get up. They got to change their plan, right? Nope. The Cadillac fits perfectly on the subway track, and its tires are burned up and explode, and its rims just start riding on the track as if it was made for them.
Yeah.
So it's just this kind of, I just really... I am a little bit insane, I guess, because even I watch that now and I just think I hate that, because it's almost like that stuff belongs in Lynch. Like, it's just so like, it's like a nightmare where it's like, what the crap? How is this possible? How's this happening? And so for me, it's not fun.
Yeah,
it wasn't fun then. It's not fun now. Anyway, that's just my own neuroses, listeners. You can fast forward past that. Anyway, so I got to give a pass on that movie.
Yeah.
I'm going to say there's lots of kids movies, even movies that are made for kids that are worth watching. And that's not one of them. I don't think that one has stood the test of time for many reasons, not the least of which is Billy Joel voicing a dog, riding on top of a construction crane, singing, "Why should I worry? Why should I care?"
Oh, man. You know what's funny, Justin? And tell me if you can relate to this. And, I don't want to take 10 more minutes on this, but I find myself as a father of 3 children, 2 of them similar ages to your own, introducing kids to films and TV and stuff like that, because it's not just a thing I enjoy. I think it's an important thing, just like introducing them to good music or good paintings or whatever, right? Like we obviously, we do this podcast because we value critically thinking about, art. We just happen to be 2 uneducated, unqualified movie nerds doing it. But I find the burden of helping to shape my kids' taste in these things. Like, I just wonder, like, I know other people with kids the same age and they just like throw on whatever or watch what their kids want to watch. And I'm like, I can't do it. Like, I can't. Like,
no.
It's not just a matter of like, age appropriate content and figuring out like, oh, what are they ready to watch and what are they not ready to watch, whatever. That's a whole other conversation. But just this idea of like, no, you can't watch that because it's bad. Like, it's stupid. Right. I'm not going to let you watch that. Yeah. I'm sure some parents look at that in me and they just go like, what's the matter with you?
Yeah, no, those people are probably defined as normal, but I am firmly in your camp. Because I think the way that you and I might view that is more like art is food. So if you're going to consume, you kind of do consume art, not in like a, when we talk about consumerism in art, that usually brings up bad images of, like pop popcorn flicks that are just like low grade, not even worthy of being called B movie. But I don't mean it in that term. I mean that like what you are what you intake, right? You eat really healthy food, your body's probably going to thank you and work better than if you just eat Lay's potato chips. There goes that sponsor.
Yeah. Dang it, Justin.
So and I think the
like
same
flies.
is true for the same is true for any art. If all you watch is like soap operas, daytime soaps, there's not really anything there for you to really examine and really like understand or even have like as a passing thought any of the questions we're interested in trying to answer on this show.
Yeah.
Because you just don't develop a taste for it. So I feel the same way as you, man. I want to, as much as possible, to try to develop that taste, not hopefully for snobbishness or like, oh no, it's not on the Criterion Collection. Please, children, we're not watching this.
We're watching Apocalypse Now tonight, and I don't want to hear any complaints. Yes.
Right? Yeah. No, you could quickly go into like some ludicrous territory. But for me, it's just like, hey, some stuff is good, and there's a lot of subjectivity in there, but there's so much good out there that I think most folks can just agree on, that I want to expose them to as much of that as I can, so that when they go out and they start making decisions on their own as young people, that hopefully they make choices that are gonna benefit them. Because one of the reasons we do this, hopefully this isn't too highfalutin, Travis, just shut me down if we get there, is like we wanna try to show or explain at least why we think art has real value.
Yeah.
It's not one of those things that just gets on the chopping block first, right? Like, which tends to happen at like some schools and things, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, we're running out of money, I guess we'll not have art class anymore. It's like, art culture does not run on just a bunch of business and factories.
Of course.
That's not all of culture. Anyway, folks, art has value.
Art
I've
is
lost
good.
it completely.
No, you're good. You're good. And, you did mention making wise choices, and I think one thing we can both agree on is the wise choice, as I'm doing right now, is to drink a delicious, tasty carbonated beverage called Dr. Pepper. And I just want the good folks at Dr. Pepper to know that we endorse you as a beverage.
Yeah.
You were, I mean, after all, invented by a doctor, so it must be healthy.
It's probably healthy.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think they're in league with Lay's, and I've gotten word that Lay's has already sent a missive to them. So I think that's
I'm going to keep sipping on this delicious, nutritious Dr. Pepper, and we're going to dive into the dark, bubbling seas of 1954's Godzilla. Okay. I finished my Dr. Pepper, and I just have to say.
Was it delicious?
It was delicious, and it has a crispness that other sodas just don't seem to have. I don't know what that is. Anyway, okay, so we're talking about 1954's Godzilla. Before we talk about the movie individually, I think we have to talk about sort of the franchise as a whole a little bit, and the cultural impact of this series, because I think you'd be hard pressed, Justin, to talk to a normal person on the street who's just like a casual movie watcher, or even a little bit of a film nerd, honestly, and be like, hey, have you seen the original Godzilla? And they would be like, oh yeah, the one from 2000, or oh yeah, the one from the 80s, or oh yeah, the one from the 70s. Yeah. This is like, without any caveat, this is the longest running film franchise of all time, bar none. There are 36. Yeah. 36
as of 2022.
There you go. And
they're in production on another one.
No kidding, because the last couple they made a bunch of freaking money. And so it's kind of impossible to suss out the beginning here, but this is in fact the beginning. This is the first feature film, and it's born out of very real things, and it's also packaged in the same way that tons of movies of this time were packaged, which was like as a B movie, monster movie, definitely has that vibe to it. So Justin, what is you had mentioned before you'd seen a bunch of these. I have only ever seen, I talked about it on the podcast, like a couple seasons ago, maybe the Godzilla versus Kong that came out a couple years ago.
You did.
I saw that, and I've seen the Gareth Edwards. What is that? 2014 or something like that.
Right around there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's like the newest Godzilla in name.
Shouldn't have killed Bryan Cranston so early.
No,
That's the issue.
No.
Well, it's one of the issues, I guess.
Yeah. It's a good. Oh man, it's a good first like 40 minutes or something like that, and then it just kind of keeps going. That's we can talk about the Gareth Edwards one kind of concurrently with the 54 version if you want to, but I've only seen again a couple of the new ones. This is my first time watching the 54, and then I only know it from almost Sunset Boulevard levels of like these clips are pervasive, the sound effects, as we'll talk about, are pervasive, and just the character just looms large, no pun intended, over so much of what we know about like pop culture like today. And so what of these have you seen, and how have you enjoyed them or not?
Most of the ones I've seen, my friend, were as a kid from probably the ages of whenever I saw this one, because I think this was the first one I ever saw at the age of 6 or 7. And then I watched several of the other ones. I even saw some of the in like kind of the extended Godzilla universe.
Yeah.
I think there's a whole movie about Mothra, which I did see. I think I saw Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla as it was released, and it is as awesome as it sounds. It's like Robot Godzilla from outer space or something, as I recall.
Well, Mechagodzilla pops up in the newest one too, so I've seen a Mechagodzilla, but yeah.
Wow, I'm glad they brought that back.
Well, it was too good to not bring back. Too good.
So yeah, honestly, most of these movies, I think at that level, as a kid, I was watching it for kind of the dopamine fix of when do I get to see more big monsters. So. And I did see the Matthew Broderick one when that came out in theaters. I do that intro, those first scenes when they're on the sea. I forget. That still rings with me. That was not bad. That was not a bad sequence.
I got to rewatch that one because I haven't seen that since like I don't know. I saw that on DVD. After, in the wake of it coming out, and it was a huge movie, like massive budget, huge like movie of the decade, like expectations, and then it totally like critically got destroyed,
Yeah,
but it has a good cast and stuff.
It may be really bad. Yeah. I don't remember. I just remember the beginning and the end and Godzilla in the middle.
And I think there's baby Godzillas in it, if I'm not mistaken.
There's baby Godzilla.
Eggs somewhere.
And I had an action figure of Matthew Broderick, actually. And I was carrying that action figure. My dad was a carpenter, and he was building a deck. And I was playing with that Matthew Broderick's action figure had like a grappling hook or something, so I was kind of swinging. And my dad was building a deck, so I was walking on these deck joists at the age of 7 or whatever. And
the action figure everyone wants, Matthew Broderick.
Yeah, I was like, "Where's Matthew, folks?" at Toys R Us. Anyway, so I was walking on these deck joists, having a good old time with Matthew Broderick because my dad was actually doing real work, and then. Boom, I slipped and split my head open on one of the deck joists, and there was a lot of blood. Anyway, Godzilla, that's
where you got your
Godzilla
scar?
trauma there.
Because don't you have a little nick on your forehead to this day?
Yeah.
Man, thanks a lot, Matthew Broderick. Jeez.
It's all his fault.
Litigation is still ongoing.
That's right. It's still ongoing.
Yeah.
No, anyway, that was really apropos of nothing. Sorry for wasting everyone's time. But, so the newer ones, Travis, I don't think I've seen actually any the Gareth Edwards one. I made the Bryan Cranston comment just because you explained that to me. And I thought that sounds like it makes a lot of sense. Yeah. But my kids now, having seen this movie, they want more Godzilla. And so I showed them a little bit of the original Godzilla versus Kong.
Yeah.
From 1963, I think. There I go, naming useless dates again. And man, it is so it's terrible, but it's kind of fun to watch because it's so. I mean, it's just bad. All that suit, the suitmation is just golly, it is not good. And King Kong, it's like someone has levers to open his eyes. He's huh?
That's how Godzilla is in this movie too. I think there's cables operating Godzilla's eyes, which don't seem to blink a lot in this movie, but apparently they're supposed to.
Yeah. So anyway, that's a brief, not very efficient overview of. I've seen a fair amount of these movies, but I don't have any of them on like the repeat playlist or anything. But I think what is maybe most germane to our discussion today is that maybe with exception to what America and Hollywood is trying to do with its Godzilla franchise now at Universal. Those movies went really far in the other direction from what this movie was.
Sure.
And I agree with you that this came in an era where monster movies were just kind of the thing. It was just a niche genre, and there wasn't a lot of brain power or emotion invested in them, right? It was like, hey, want to go see the scary movie on date night? And, I don't know that any of them really stand the test of time, honestly.
Yeah.
In terms of like, is this a really good movie? Not is it, it may be enjoyable and have fun sequences or something,
Sure.
but a lot of them are just not good, at least in my opinion.
Yeah.
This movie is in a different league.
It is. It's helmed by Ishiro Honda. That's the director, and then you've got who apparently was a close personal friend of
Kurosawa?
Yeah, Kurosawa.
Yeah.
So the cast is good.
Yeah. And what's his name? Takashi Shimura is in this one. Our friend from Stray Dog last season.
Yeah, and I don't really care what you give him to do. If you put a camera on that man, his face is amazing. Like he just has a good face.
Yes.
And I think most importantly, as the last bit of the background info before we get into what's it saying, this is in 1954, and the atomic bombs both hit Japan in 1945. So we are 9 years by the time of this release, detached from that. That's not the word I want to use. What am I trying to say?
Well, it's just been 9 years.
9 years
in
removed.
the future.
Yes. So very recent history, which obviously, if you've watched the movie anytime recently, comes into play big time. And yeah, it's definitely groundbreaking as far as technology and effects go. That doesn't mean all of them hold up, and we'll get into that. But let's get into the really interesting stuff, which is, what is it saying? So I think one of the most striking things about this movie, Justin, is, and I think we should go through it kind of plot point by plot point, if that's cool with you.
Okay. Yeah, let's do it.
Because it's not one of those movies that has 87 plot points. It's got like 6, and we can work our way through it without getting stuck on any one thing and boring everybody to tears here. The most striking thing about it is the way this thing opens, with first just the noises of something. Like in 1954, this is the noises of a creature you've literally never heard before, because what we all today know as like, oh yeah, the roars that the dinosaurs make in Jurassic Park, right? That sort of spectrum of like sound effects that we're used to, and we just somehow associate with dinosaurs, even though there's very little scientific evidence to indicate that dinosaurs, reptiles have any vocal abilities at all.
Right. In fact, they more than likely laughed. They chuckled mildly to themselves as they were going extinct.
I'm gonna eat you. They made the decision in this movie to make Godzilla roar, and apparently the way that they did that was by like using a resin covered leather glove and grinding it against contrabass strings, and then like putting it through reverb effects and stuff. So
kid hasn't?
Every kid's pastime, just like that's what I did as a kid. I don't know about you. So that's how it opens up. You hear the noises, you see the credits, you see the title, and then this score comes in, which is really cool and exciting sounding. And the opening sequences of, like you mentioned, and I think they redo this in the remake. It's of a ship kind of going down for unforeseen circumstances, and just sort of the beginning, 40 minutes of this, 30 minutes of this at least, is very show don't tell, or tell don't show, whatever the right version of that saying is, where you don't see
the second one.
You don't see the monster and stuff. So the ship goes down, and they're like, what's going on? And so it's ominous and dreary, and it's freaky, freaky and
it's tense,
sad,
right?
And tense.
Even today.
Yeah, I think the tone that's set by the opening sequences of like the ship goes down and it feels like a real thing, like urgent, tragic, like we got to figure out what the heck happened out there. it's not at all like set piecey at the beginning. It's really just like it almost feels documentary style or something.
And don't you get the sense, Travis, that, or at least I got the sense that this movie was instantly way more interested in retaining and kind of maintaining a human component to
Sure.
storytelling? Because as soon as these fishing boats go down, just like, I mean, in other words, not like no one, quote unquote, important is there on the world stage, right? Or even in Japan. But they make several, or the filmmakers make several attempts and scenes are set explicitly just to show the wives of the fishermen.
Yes.
Just like worried and like, where are these people? So instantly it's like, it's not a normal monster movie. You know, in the monster movie, usually it's like some person, maybe a villainous or some poor innocent person is like walking where they shouldn't be. And then, you know, you never hear about them again.
Right.
Right. Except somebody later's like, well, yes, we did lose someone 17 years ago.
Yeah.
But in this movie, instead, you get close-ups of people that look panic-stricken.
Yeah.
And just, do you have news? What happened to these people?
Yeah.
And I know for me, at least, it instantly put me in the place where I wanted to know, too.
Sure.
And where, I mean, you kind of know by the movie's title, I guess, but I don't know. I think it puts the viewer maybe in a different place where you empathize with the characters in the movie and just the people as a whole. It's not just like the couple protagonists that you spend most of the time with. You really feel, I think, which I think the movie does very intentionally, you start to feel for this whole kind of group of people that are experiencing this, which I think is really masterfully done in kind of a simple way.
I agree. I totally agree. And it happens so early, like you said, like when this ship goes down, there's a group of people, mainly women, right, at this police station, and they are panicking. Like you said, it does not feel like over the top B-movie acting. It feels like real, like horror. And there's like people saying things like, are there any survivors? And immediately, like, I don't know, less than 10 minutes into this movie, I'm just looking at it like, holy crap. Can you imagine being a Japanese film goer 9 years from the time, you know, the atomic bombs hit your country's soil, and the devastation, and like you're saying, Justin, the collective mourning, the collective panic, the collective trauma of that, which, you know, frankly, like we as Americans don't do as well. You know, like we have some cultural moments where we have that attachment, but it's like, even something like 9/11, right? The scale of it is, not to say it's not tragic or anything, but like the amount of lives we're talking about lost in the nukes from World War II compared to something like that it's not even a blip on the radar, you know? And so, and this is 9 years right after. So you see these images of these folks panicking about an unknown terror that's starting to, you know, take lives little by little. And then obviously that grows as the movie goes. And like immediately I'm just thinking like, oh man, this movie knows exactly what it is. Like it really has no pretense about like showing, you know, in the trappings of a very on the nose, thinly veiled allegory for, you know, nuclear destruction or the nuclear bomb or whatever. Like it is really concerned with the human fallout, you know, the human consequences of all those things. And you see that in their faces. You see that in like the way that they shoot, Justin, like when Godzilla first surfaces on the island, right? I can't remember the name of the island, but there's an island that you see in the beginning where the ship that's been done.
Odo Island, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's this family like in this house, and they kind of know Godzilla's out there. Something's out there. People are starting to say it's Godzilla, and then the monster attacks. And again, in this sequence, you don't really see the monster. You just see what looks like a storm and like earthquake kind of typhoon looking activity. But the way that house crumbles is like so jarring and effective. It's not at all miniature looking or, you know, comedic, like, oh, look at those effects. It looks terrifying to me, you know. And I
agree.
And immediately in that fallout, Justin, you start to get the idea introduced of radiation, you know, and when they come to see the destruction of that. So do you want to talk for a minute just about like how this movie goes about its laying out the parallels between the fictional B-movie stuff in this movie and like the real world sort of horrors that they were definitely dealing with at the time.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I guess that's there's probably many dissertations that have been written about that,
Yeah.
but we'll try. I think part of the magic of this movie and why, at least for me, this movie really holds up and it lasts a lot more than something like Godzilla vs. Kong 1963. Is because it is a B movie in the sense that it fits in that genre, right? There's a monster,
Sure.
and it's a guy in a suit, and there's miniatures used to show destruction. But the point that's not the intent. I don't get from Honda. Even if you don't know any of the history, I think it's pretty self-evident watching this that his concerns, like we just touched on, are much more human.
Yeah.
And I think this movie, while it does not exist, in my opinion, without Nagasaki and Hiroshima being struck with atomic weapons. But I think that the genius of this movie is that it's not just some like overly simplistic metaphor for that.
Yeah, there's more there.
It's not just like, but I mean, part of the genius is there because later when you see that Godzilla is wrecking more and more carnage, and things get even more intense, which we can go into when we get there, you get the sense that Honda is giving you a little insight into what must have it looked like in and around Nagasaki and Hiroshima when people are just devastated. I think, I don't know that anyone knows like an exact total of how many people died in those two atomic blasts, but it's somewhere around 200,000 people.
Yeah.
And I think that you get that kind of scale in this movie, although they're not like, hey, here's the latest death toll. It's just pretty clear by the amount of destruction that's going on.
A lot.
That there's a lot of dead people. And a lot of infrastructure is destroyed. And so I get the real sense that he is really there is no way in heck that a movie about Hiroshima or Nagasaki could be made in 1950 anything, or probably 1960 anything. But you have this dinosaur-ish thing, you have Godzilla, and suddenly it's like fair game. We can peel back the curtain a little bit and try to give you a little taste of the horror and the devastation and the tragedy of just this mass wipeout.
And so, like, you mentioned the total, Justin, and like I think you're, dead on for the estimates or whatever. But the one thing we do know is that the vast majority of the people who were killed in those bombings were civilians. Like,
oh yeah, totally.
And
no, there's no argument there.
And the movie makes a distinct point, in the amount of screen time it gives to military, to civilian characters, to say like, this has hit the people. You know what I mean? And the mourning scenes you get, the scenes of the fallout, which we can get into the hospital sequence after the real big Godzilla attack in the middle is like so reminiscent of like Gone with the Wind,
Yes, I was thinking the same thing. Yeah,
it's like you see people and there's no score here. It's just like a camera kind of wandering around with one of our characters, and you just hear like screaming. And there's a particular moment in there where like you hear a kid start screaming, no, 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 and then they like pan over, and this kid is being restrained by someone, and they're just carrying, their parent on a gurney away. It's like, holy crap, this is not just popcorn movie stuff.
No.
Like there's some real attempt to handle this with like the opposite of kid gloves,
And two things I'd like to add to that real quick. One is that the movie also has this extra layer where it's like Godzilla is not just a substitution for the atom bomb. Because what awakens Godzilla is hydrogen bomb testing, right? That's what the movie offers. And so you get the sense, too, where it's like humanity is its own worst enemy, where we have awakened and or unleashed something even more horrific than the atom bomb by the usage of the atom bomb, right? Which is just this great, Cold War commentary on, a fear that's still real today. I think we're a little more numb to it because it hasn't happened, but there's plenty of folks in the 50s through the Reagan era that thought it's all going to end. We're just going to annihilate each other. And so I get a little taste of that from that subtext. The second thing being, you're talking about that scene, which I agree is really affecting still with the kid. And then there's a kid covering their eyes. in the hospital too.
That really got me. I don't know about you, but I was just like,
it was not okay. Yeah. In the perfect way, it was not okay.
Yeah.
But the other scene that I think got me even more than that is when later on we've talked about how some of the miniatures are still really good, like the house.
The
And
train crash is really good too. I like that's early on. The
train crash is good.
Looks really good.
There's a couple like fire engines that crash. Unfortunately, those don't look nearly as good.
No, they're Tonka trucks all the way.
But that is right next to a scene where a mother hugs her child and says, as hell and fire and brimstone are raining down around them, and says, "It's okay, we're going to go see Daddy soon. We're going to go to where Daddy is."
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my, I can't laugh at the fire truck now. That's not even funny in 2022.
Yeah.
Because it's, I wonder if Honda honestly he's like, that fire truck doesn't look quite convincing. I know how I'll stop them from laughing.
Yeah.
I will give them the thickest slice of hell that this movie can serve up.
Yeah.
And again, it's not the tragedy and the effectiveness of this movie to me is not in just like seeing Godzilla, which is still pretty affecting. Even I think especially in light of what they were working with in 1954 and having no Hollywood machine behind them.
Sure.
It's amazing that they pulled that off, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
But that scene with the mom and her daughter just shows me this movie, it's about the people.
Yeah.
I think Honda is really trying to say, look, it's for that mother and that child. It's for all of us. We shouldn't want to just destroy, which is another subplot of the movie, right? About should we destroy Godzilla, how to destroy Godzilla.
Yeah.
But we shouldn't want to just kill and destroy each other. What is wrong with us? How do we stop this from happening? Yeah. And to me, that makes this movie last and speak even more strongly.
Yeah. Well, what's cool about this movie is it is so set piecey, with the Godzilla stuff and the destruction and this, again, no pun intended, but the scale of what they're trying to do, showing the monster destroying the city and attacking people and burning people alive and all that. Definitely there was like time and effort and attention put into all these things. There's innovation there with, again, what's called suitmation technology, which is basically like the stop motion would take too long. So we're putting a dude in a suit. We're building everything to scale. Everything is real models. So that's all new, right? But the people at the center of the story, there's only 4 of them, that matter really. There's a lot of other characters that we cut to, like the mother and the daughter and other people. But we have Takashi Shimura, who he plays Dr. Yamane, and then Akiko Hirata plays Serizawa, who is the amazingly eye-patched other doctor guy. And then the other 2, which are sort of like our co-protagonists, which is also interesting and kind of ahead of its time in a way, because you don't just have like a dude who's kind of hunky at the center of the story or a damsel in distress. You have this like couple who are dealing with real life, like stages of life stuff. Ogata and Yamane, and this couple at the center of the story, they're like going through this collective horrible thing that nobody knows what to do about it. Nobody knows what's going to happen. And at the same time, there's just this little thread, which isn't like too much or too little, in my opinion, of like, they love each other and he needs to ask for the father's blessing. Takashi Shimura's character, the father, and like they are dealing with that stuff alongside the like existential threat of this creature. To me, Justin, the plot here with these 4, you've got Takashi Shimura's character playing the doctor who, honestly, in 1954, in a movie like this that is made in Japan about Japanese trauma in a lot of ways and the effects that the nuclear bombs had on that larger community and everything, there's a like conservationist like thread here where like over and over again his character is like, I don't think we should kill this thing. I think we should study it. Like, I think we need to know more about this creature. And he picks up the prehistoric organism out of the footprint at one point, and he's like, this is an amazing discovery. And so there's a piece there that like it doesn't go anywhere because the threat is too much, but still it's like I found that the sort of stick to your guns mentality of keeping that in the script and making it part of the final cut and making it who his character was really interesting. It's stuff that we wouldn't see like play out until like much, much, much later, where whole movies are about, like our effect on nature and the climate and all that kinds of stuff. And then Serizawa's an interesting character, the eye patch sort of secretive doctor who's working on this project that you don't find out what it is until a little bit later in the movie. They have a relationship, Ogata and Serizawa, where they were in the war together, I think is what it's sort of hinted at. That's how he lost his eye. They both have affection for Yamane, the female protagonist, and it's like a love triangle that they don't make matter so much that it becomes about the love triangle, kind of thing. And then the main thing that happens with the people, Justin, is so tied to the themes, which is Serizawa has a way. He has a new form of technology, a new weapon to destroy just like masses of creatures underneath the water if need be or whatever. And this thing, Justin, has an amazing name. It is called the Oxygen Destroyer. And
which apparently in Japanese is pronounced Oxygen Destroyer.
It's true because he says Oxygen Destroyer, more Japanese things. So there's, that's where like the name of the thing, and I almost want to say the look of it, except for that it kind of looks like weirdly like a little nuke or something. There's something about it that has like the design of real things, but like, to a sci-fi movie, B-movie kind of degree. And so it becomes about, like you said, like Godzilla seems like this kind of perfect analog for like we have let loose the nuclear bomb and Godzilla has been loosed or whatever. But then there's this whole other point to the story, which is there's always going to be another breakthrough in technology. There's always going to be another depth to man's wanting the power to destroy his enemies. And this character is burdened by just possessing it and putting it to use at all. And man, like, it comes in the third act there in a way that's like the most tense stuff in this movie happens between those four characters, not between Godzilla and electrical, lines or buildings or tanks or something like that.
Right. No, I agree, Travis. And just to, again, I have not seen the newer Godzilla movie with Bryan Cranston in it, but I think what we're talking about so perfectly, again, having not seen the movie, it seems to encapsulate why this movie really works and why that one didn't. Because this movie is still the final shot of this movie is not, spoiler alert, it's not like Godzilla, right? I mean, he definitely figures into the final frame, but when the Oxygen Destroyer takes care of Godzilla,
destroys, yes,
then check it out, took his oxygen. Then you've got all these four people, and one of them, and Mr. Eye Patch. Dr. Serizawa decides to kill himself because he does not want anyone to replicate or force him to replicate this device again. Mm-hmm. And then you've got Dr. Yamane sitting down, and everyone weeps. Yeah. And it's just like, oh my gosh, this movie knows exactly that. That's why a story like this would matter, because it's going to affect us all. Yeah. It doesn't matter because, I want to see Godzilla destroy some cool buildings. I mean, that has its place. That can be interesting, but that's not a story. Yeah. The story is what happens to the people that are involved. And just for me that that he cuts that line, that's just a great piece of movie making, because you've got them pulling up the line, and it's did they get him in time? No, they didn't, and they just pull up this empty line. Yeah. And then that those three characters, right, that are left, Ogata and Yamane and his daughter Emiko Yamane, everyone cries essentially for a different reason. Yeah. I feel like, and it's just this great layering of like how damned humanity is, I think, in some sense, and how I totally agree with you, Travis. There's always going to be something else. It's not like even if we solved, tomorrow morning we woke up and nuclear weapons were gone from the world. Guess what? We don't need those to cause havoc and chaos and terror and death. We've been doing it since people picked up sticks to do it. I am just really struck by how that movie zeroed in on that, Travis, and I'm trying to bring it back to the newer Godzilla that you've told me about, where when Bryan Cranston character was really involved in the story, it sounded really compelling and really interesting, because you've got the tension of the monster, but also the tension of this guy, right? Yes. But then when you just remove him, now we've just got the monster, and that's not. I'm not a physical monster like Godzilla, so I for me, it would sound like I can't relate anymore.
Sure.
Would you say that is part of the problem if
Yeah.
you were going to compare kind of the human element in those two?
Totally. I mean, like, you cast Bryan Cranston and you just, I'm sorry, but you use him the whole time. Like, there's no, this isn't Psycho where like killing off the lead character, an hour in is like some sort of cool gotcha moment. The two that I've seen, right? I haven't seen, what is it called? Godzilla King of Monsters. It was like the Godzilla sequel before Kong Skull Island, or I don't know. There's those 4 new ones. The two that I've seen, to me, they play as direct kind of spiritual successors to one, the Gareth Edwards Godzilla is trying to be this movie in that it is serious and somber in tone. It's trying to be real scary, not like kind of goofy action comedy scary. And the reason it doesn't succeed is because it doesn't have these human characters at the heart all the way through. Even though, this movie gets away with killing a very important character, just it does it in a meaningful way at the time in the story that makes sense. He literally, his last words are like, "I hope you two will be happy." It's like, holy crap, like this is just supposed to be a dumb monster movie. And then someone's, sacrificing themselves for the good of humanity, anyway. And then the Godzilla versus Kong, the newest one, is definitely not trying to be this kind of movie. It's trying to be like, oh, all those like other ones, Mecha Godzilla, Mothra, Godzilla, Godzilla Max, all of those, like, they exist so that people can enjoy watching two people smash, action figures together. That is what that movie is. It's an analog for that. And, like I think I said when I reviewed it at the time, it was the first movie I saw back in theaters after a long time in isolation. And for what it was, like, man, it packed a really fun, let's go to the theater and have a collective experience punch. But like, that has limited value. It is what it is. So before we get into our wrap up, Justin, I want to give us both an opportunity to touch on anything we haven't already said. I mean, this movie's plot is pretty simple. There's not like some sort of like big mystery or like winding, twisting element. But there are two things. It's one thing I want to touch on in 2 examples. The music is really, really effective. Yeah. It has a big 1950s orchestral score, but it's just a really good one. And I'm like listening to it, Justin, thinking, why don't they just like redo this for some of the new movies? Because it's got such a good hook. It's got that like dun 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 dun. It's really, really good. And it happens like from the opening credits, and then it comes in the big Godzilla attack, and it comes back at the end. And then the other musical sequence is the one that I think is most like the most beautiful piece of filmmaking in the whole movie, which is they're all in Serizawa's lab, and they're trying to convince him, Emiko and Ogata are trying to convince him, like, you've got to use this thing to destroy the monster. There's no other way. And he's like laying out the case. He's like, I can't do this. The world powers will see me do this and want to use it for worse things, and then they look over to the TV and a news broadcast pops up. And what is playing on the news broadcast is this like amazing, gorgeous hymn sung by like hundreds of Japanese girls while they like, it looks seriously, like it just looks like post-war World War II footage if you watch the movie. Yeah. And they keep cutting back to these girls. And what's so effective about it is the realness of that scope and tragedy that, the people who are suffering from radiation. There's a point in this movie, Justin, where they point a Geiger counter at a little boy's forehead and it goes off the charts. And you just think for a moment, like, what does that mean for that kid? Like, I mean, holy actual crap. They just told me without saying anything in this movie that this kid is radioactive and he's going to like suffer until he dies, essentially, you know? So they keep cutting back to these girls singing, and it's like, it is just rows and rows and rows of girls singing things like, oh, please, will our dead come back to us? And it's like, it is really harrowing. And I don't know what to say other than like this. If you think this movie is like any of its sequels, just please watch it and know that it is something different, man. It is something different.
I'm right there with you, Travis. And I would echo what you said and just add my perspective on that scene too with the girls choir. and hearing them say, "Give us peace." That's repeated in that song, right? "Oh, peace, give us your light." And I think for me, there is something to be said about the subtext of every other. You have lots of people in this movie, and the production value is just kind of nuts to me. Like the film starts out by thanking the Japanese Coast Guard for helping them get it done. You know, there's fighter planes, non-miniatures in this movie.
Yep.
There's
and miniatures.
yeah, there are miniatures also, but there's also real life ones. There's like real life depth charges they use in this movie, which is pretty cool, even for 1954. It just looks good still. But and you've got hundreds of extras. You know, sometimes people are all running, kind of pell-mell all over the place. But the time that you see the most people together, organized and doing something, is that scene with the girls. Yep. And to me, I think that if I'm going to read anything into that, it's Honda saying he's still, I mean, a guy that has lived through, from a society that has lived through something that no other culture has, right? Thank goodness.
Yep.
Lived through nuclear holocaust. He is saying, I think that there are still more people than there are not people who would stand up and say, I just want to live a peaceful life.
Yeah.
And so to me, it's a really amazing moment of hope in a movie that's pretty bleak and nobody really knows how to kill Godzilla until there's the oxygen destroyer.
Thank goodness.
You do have this real ray of hope and this tone, and the movie is not hopeful overall. No. I mean, it ends with Yamane, Dr. Yamane saying, you've killed Godzilla, but if hydrogen bombs keep getting tested around the world, I bet that someday, somewhere, another Godzilla will rise. It's like you could chalk that up to be like, oh great, here's like pre-Marvel Stinger before Marvel. No, but I don't think I think that's a bad read.
They didn't know that the sequel was happening in 1954. No. That's not how things work then. So there's no, you know what I mean? Like we are trained to think that way now, but you have to take every last line of a movie from this era as this is our last thing to say. And if that's their last thing to say, then it is just like a stamp at the period at the end of the sentence of everything the movie was saying, which is like, by the way, if you didn't get it, you know, this could happen again, period. You know, like it's really, really convicted in what it is saying, I think.
Absolutely. And I'd totally agree with you. I mean, we're kind of bleeding over, I guess, into, you know, would we recommend you watch it?
Okay, let me tell a story that might deflate the somberness of the conversation as it was needed to be. It's, you know, in line with the movie that we wouldn't be like, oh, this is Joke Fest 2000.
Right.
However, there is a kind of amusing anecdote that I can't verify the historicity with like a really solid source, but just the idea that this could have happened makes me kind of happy. Apparently there's a sort of a legend about this movie that when they were in pre-production and working on the script, Honda and one of the producers were up on a tall building in Tokyo, and they were standing there with some other like touristy onlooker people. And they were talking through like, okay, so Godzilla's going to come in from this direction. He's going to stomp over the building there and rip off that clock face from that clock tower, you know, and they were literally going through the steps of the destruction of the destruction of Tokyo sequence. And as they're saying these things, people are listening to what they're saying and becoming very, very deeply concerned. And by the time they got back down to the street level, they literally were like pulled aside by authorities and questioned, like, what are you doing? What are you planning? And I just think that's kind of amazing.
Yes, the art has become reality, I guess. I think it's just amazing that this movie, that these folks had the courage to make it. I mean, it'd be one thing to make it, you know, like today, you know, generations away, but for folks to have lived through that hell and then to just be like, you know what, I think we need to tell the world about our experience. My hat's still off to them. That takes a lot of courage and a lot of wisdom that we can still benefit from today.
Okay, well, as we are wont to do, Justin, we're not very we don't hold our cards all that close to the vest when it comes to answering our final question. That would be a boring show if we were like, and this happens, but I'm not going to tell you how I feel about it until the end. How would you answer our final questions? Is this worth people's time, and how often would you rewatch it?
Yeah, it's worth your time. I think it might almost be required viewing. Because this is a great movie if you like movies. If you are like, hey, monsters. If you are interested in World War II history, especially how it ended, I think this movie would be interesting. If you're interested in nuclear proliferation and the fate of the atomic question, I think this movie is really, at least here in 2022, it's still really relevant. And it has so much to say that it still rings true, and that it does it without being preachy. And I think that's because it's told from the experience of folks that lived through that. They didn't read this in a book and decide to make it. Who knows what kind of tragedy they suffered in their own lives because of this. And yet this movie is done without, also, I think what makes it kind of amazing is it's not trying to portray Japan as a victim. They're trying to, if anything, just give a warning, say, hey, we lived through this. I don't think anyone else wants to, so why don't we do something about it?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the world at large, at least the superpowers, didn't really listen, but it's still a good message. I would rewatch this movie. It's not a difficult watch. And even though it deals with some heavy things, I would watch it once a year. Yeah. I think. Yeah, I think once a year is about good for me. What about you?
Yeah, well, the other Japanese film we've covered is Stray Dog, and these two would make a really interesting double billing, don't you think?
Yeah.
Because you've
absolutely
got like two stylistically like wildly different movies, but both confirming what the other one says about like Japan and moving forward in the future, kind of a thing. One of them is sort of the somber side of the coin. This one, Godzilla is that one. And it really says like, this is the reality of what has occurred. And Stray Dog is more about like, okay, how do we put our next foot forward? Can we put our next foot forward? And so for that reason, like it's totally worth your time. And I mean, with the one big asterisk of like, you've got to just give it the grace, give it the leeway of like, there are going to be sequences in this where you're like, whoa, those effects look really good. And then like you get an hour in and you're like, okay, most of this looks pretty janky, you just have to give it that, and this film is worth it. It's worth you giving a little bit of leeway or whatever to just get the good out of it, because most of the thrust of what it's saying, most of the goodness of what it's saying is so much more important when you watch the movie than, whether Godzilla's breath looks like, a fog machine or whether Godzilla's breath looks atomic or what have you. Yeah, I think it's a really valuable lesson for American audiences to see this, because we, again, like you said, thank goodness that no other country in the world has had to suffer the same fate. But like, if you just want a little piece of this movie engenders feelings, man, even though it's a goofy monster movie on one level, maybe at the surface level, like it engenders the feeling of dread and terror that we were in the Cold War era, at least on this side of the globe, just afraid of possibly experiencing. They, like you said, they lived it, and these are the faces and the cries and the voices of people who really did experience this. So it's good. It's really good. And hey, it's not too long. It's an hour and 36 minutes. So like, if you're one of those people who's like, I'm not going to put 2 hours into that, don't do that. It's worth your time. I'd rewatch it every couple years just because I think the kid crying moment would bum me out, Justin. But other than that.
Well, Travis, we've made it through 4 episodes now, I think, in the 50s. Yes. And what is coming up? I think a first is coming up next week.
Howdy, partner. That's my best cowboy voice. And we're doing a Western. High Noon, 1952. Should be good.
Well, I thought it was Gary Cooper in the room, so
Yeah.
well done.
I'll have to work on my Gary Cooper. My Jimmy Stewart's a little ahead of my Gary Cooper, which is not saying a lot. I'm excited to watch this. Hopefully you'll be back with us next week, folks. Thanks for listening.
Happy trails.
Let the movie speak.
Hey, since you're still here and still listening, thank you, by the way, we'd like to ask an additional favor of you.
We have social media. It's a thing on the internet. And all you need to do is find us on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook and like and subscribe. I know this is annoying, but we have to ask you because we want more people to hear the show. In addition to that, if you could rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen, we would greatly appreciate it. See you next week. Bye.